Seeing in the Dark started, of course, as a book, and now it's this wonderful film that you've produced. What was it that inspired you to take your book and convert it into such a beautiful film?
Stargazing is a beautiful subject. I don't know of any sight in nature that's more inspiring than a dark, star-filled night sky, and so I wanted to make a film that would try to do some justice to the aesthetics of stargazing. I don't believe it's ever been done. I've never seen a night sky in a film that was anything like the real thing. More often the stars are just inserted as a kind of decoration or backdrop. And that's okay, but this is a film about that backdrop, and so we had to enlist a lot of technical leverage to try to give you something of the feeling of being out there. One of my ambitions from early on in the film was to create scenes in which the sights and sound and the ambience would give you a sense of what it's like to be out stargazing at night.
Many films that are trying to teach us something will place the narrator between the subject matter and the viewer of the film. Your film did not do that.
Well, I've made a couple of presenter films myself, and there are a lot of advantages to just getting in front of a camera and explaining things. But for a stargazing film, that posture didn't really seem appropriate. As if you want to look through a telescope, you don't want an expert to step in between you and the telescope and give you a lecture. At the most, as you look through the telescope, you might like a guide to whisper in your ear a few things about what you're seeing. It's a shift that with computers has been talked about in educational terms as a shift from a paradigm of the sage on the stage to the guide at your side. It's a turn of 90 degrees. And that turn seemed appropriate for a film about stargazing. So there's very little to-camera talking by me in the film.
One of the other very charming aspects of your film is its focus on amateur astronomers and the opportunity to actually hear them discuss their work. In fact, one of the astronomers gives one of the best cases for the nature of the scientific method.
I think it's great that Robert Smith, the former NFL running back, is the chief exemplar of the scientific approach to the world in our film. Robert started out in mathematics and came to generalize his interest to embrace science more generally. And as he points out in the film, the science is not a matter of learning a lot of facts. It's not something that has to be so hard. It's just simply understanding that to take an idea seriously, it has to be a testable idea, and preferably it ought to have been tested. That simple step, which has been a huge step in human history, is still unknown to the majority of the human species.
A strong concurrence of the feeling of the music and the feeling of the beauty of the universe and the collective interweaving of sense of music and sense of observing the skies. Could you discuss how you saw that relationship when you were making the movie?
Yeah, music, like cinema, is an inherently time-bound art form. I mean, a painting doesn't change over time, but a piece of music or a piece of cinema has to, by definition. Otherwise, it's not music. You can't freeze music and still hear it. So the relationship between time, which is the real theme of Seeing in the Dark, and music was important to me from the beginning, and I was fighting from years ago until the final days of sound mixing to make sure that we got the music we wanted, and we got it right. We really helped out there by Mark Knopfler and Guy Fletcher, who came through for us in a terrific way. I really think all the music in this film is exactly what one would want. The film tells a generational story about the relationship between human timescales and cosmic timescales in a way that's never stated in the script, and which is personalized around my life, because it's a personal experience and it has to be somebody, and the only person whose experience I can tell that intimately is my own.
Were there special techniques you used in the filming of the movie which would be interesting for us to hear about?
Optics and astronomy is all about what you could call a wide bandwidth. It's about getting as much of the information in and as little noise as possible. The whole reason amateur astronomers spend so much time and effort on good optics is to get as much signal as possible. And I thought the film should do that. So it's a deep focus film. Our standard shots are deep focus because the night sky looks like a surface, but it has depth, and that's what a telescope does, is it takes you into those depths. That's the theme of the film established in the very first lines. So the idea of the film is to make sure that you get a sense of what's out there as clearly as you can. Try to see this film in HD on a big screen, because I think you'd be surprised.
And what about special effects?
Special effects were done by Don Davis, who I've worked with over the years in the past. I believe Don to be the most accomplished astronomical effects person in the world. The great thing about Don is not only does he have a ton of experience at creating effects at high-def resolutions, because he's done a lot of these IMAX and OmniMax planetarium shows, but he really understands the astronomy. So when I would say to Don, we want an accurate Orion Nebula, we want to fly through the Orion Nebula, go into the trapezium, and make a turn almost as if you were doing a gravitational acceleration around those giant stars. He knows exactly what you mean. It doesn't take a lot of explaining. And what comes back as a motion study will be exactly right.
At the end of the movie, you and your son Patrick are walking along, talking about Galileo and Kepler.
Galileo was one of the first people and the first scientist to look through a telescope at the night sky. He built his own telescopes to do that. And Kepler was the most brilliant astronomer of the era. Kepler and Galileo also represent the poles of science, of theory and observation. Not exclusively, no one's ever exclusively one or the other, but Kepler was a theoretician, and Galileo's reputation was based on his observations. So there was a dialogue between them. It was often interrupted because of personal human considerations, Galileo's careerism or whatever. But it has continued on down through this day, and it'll continue as long as there's science. And the dialogue between Patrick and myself was meant to sound like a piece of a conversation that's been going on before and will continue to go on indefinitely into the future, as I sincerely hope the scientific dialogue will.
The movie begins with water and ends with water. Can you connect that imagery for us?
Water has been a major symbol in my own intellectual development, predominantly because of Taoism, I was quite influenced by Taoism as a younger person, and still, I think I'm still fascinated by the Taoist emphasis on the limitations of words, on the fact that words are great, but there are always going to be things that you can't describe in words. Which is what Kurt Gödel's discovered about mathematics as well, that no mathematical model, no matter how accomplished, can verify its own validity. There's always some wider frame that you'll need. And these are very intriguing things to me, and they have a lot to do with the frames of reference that you encounter in astronomy when you begin to realize that your life here is set in these other spatio-temporal frames, which you are free to consult for a better understanding of the one that you live in. So the surface of the pond resembling the surface of the sky, the realization that you can look into it and that there are all sorts of strange denizens of those depths. The cycle of human life I was reminded of because we shot this film starting 50 years to the month after I had first gotten my first telescope, and the cycle of different generations. The symbol of water running through time and the association of music, all those elements are bound up in these scenes, and not because the viewer is expected to parse them all out, and create some kind of a postmodern symbology kit out of it, but because they all go into real life and the real experience of the real people that are out there looking at the stars.
Well, thank you, Tim, very much.
Thank you, Roy.